my pleasure is to go over the agritourism, because I think there's a flaw in the language.
Just one?
Just one. The 451, well, let me know when everybody's got that.
Yep.
451A it just repeats the right to farm. And B, we picked up the language from the agritourism,
Yes, I know, right.
from the agritourism section. And their header makes no sense to me. It says agritourism, semicolon, existing agricultural uses. And when you read the language, it's really
More than that?
way more than that. David, you and I had talked about that. Did you have the language we talked about, or shall you do?
I didn't write it down.
Oh, you didn't write it
Just
down?
kind of
Well, anyway,
discussed.
what we had discussed was that we could just have agricultural uses or agricultural uses in agritourism or whatever, but it's a very misleading title. Anybody have thoughts on that? No? No thoughts? Well, how about agricultural uses, or to say existing isn't exactly accurate.
No.
How about agricultural uses in agritourism? Because this did come out of the agritourism.
I know,
We wouldn't be
I
doing
know.
this if it wasn't.
I know, and we need to have agriculture in there, even though it's under a heading that says agricultural use. But we,
John, I'm sorry, I should have spoken up.
Yes,
I'm here for this particular amendment,
okay.
which I think has numbers of problems, but I'd like to, I should know the answer to this, but I'd like to start with what the objective is. Why is it here?
It's here because if the agritourism, what was recommended in the language and the section leading up to the language of the agritourism law was that there are uses that should be regulated associated with agritourism. And this was the clause they provided.
And provided, who provided it?
In the law, this was one of the options that they provided.
But it's not in the statute.
It's, I believe it's in the language we got, which is a very lengthy section.
Okay. But again, who did we get it from?
It's in the, we received the language from the whole section of the, whatever you call it, the stat, you're a lawyer, if you tell me what it is.
Let me go back to where I am, maybe.
Okay,
If I explain my concerns, maybe that'll help in this. The statute, well, go back a step. The notice, the introduction to this proposed amendment says changes to the state law now allow agritourism. The planning board has proposed the following to make the zoning ordinance consistent with the new state law. A couple of things. Agritourism was in the state law, has been in the state law for some number
yeah,
of years.
but the definition had changed.
Well, it didn't change materially. What happened is that they deleted a provision that was devoted to agritourism and put it into another section of the statute. So, I guess my point is that this introductory statement implies that we're somehow obligated to do this, and we're not.
We don't have to do anything,
Okay.
but what I think get more to the point is, what are your objections?
Well, again, I assume that we want site plan review for retail operations, right?
Right.
We have site plan for review for retail operations in the village districts and in the commercial district. In the rural district, where we don't have any retail farming operations except incidental things like
Accessory
their
retail.
accessory uses.
Yeah.
And we amended the zoning ordinance after the Mill Garden case
Right,
to cover those retail operations.
but those retail operations are not explicitly subject to site plan review, at least,
No, they're not.
yeah,
They're accessory.
right.
Okay, so back to where we want to be. What you're saying, what you're suggesting is that the town ought to have site plan review authority over any retail operation involving farming.
What this came out of, if you read, I mean, see how you read it, 451A, the right to farm, it's a right.
Right?
And I wonder whether, with something that's a right, whether you can assume site plan review.
No.
Well, the answer is yes.
Well, my colleague just said no.
Well, take a look at the statute, 2134A B. Describes practices that are incident to or in conjunction with farming operations, including selling at retail where not prohibited by local regulations. Our local regulation does not permit retail agricultural operations except by site plan review in the village districts. We already have it covered, is what I'm saying.
That's not clear to me.
I don't think it is either.
At
So
all.
only in the village, dude?
Well, it's because, look, you start with the fact that selling at retail is permitted on-site or off-site where not prohibited by local regulations.
So where does the site plan review fit in there?
Because our local regulation says you cannot engage in retail activities except in the village districts, and then only with site plan review.
Except that with that adjustment that came out of Mill Gardens, there is no explicit requirement for accessory retail use for there to be site plan review.
That's quite right. An accessory use is permitted as a matter
That's
of
right.
right.
And so this language came out of wanting, if agritourism is now defined, and if we don't address it, then in the rural district, somebody could have
All I need is a farm. to
well, you
start.
need a farm, you can do anything,
And you can do
and
anything.
there's no parking, there's no oversight, the neighbors are gonna complain.
Well,
The whole point,
but it's not permitted.
Agritourism is.
agritourism is now a right.
No, it's not.
It's allowed in every district,
No, it's not.
based on what?
Based on the statute.
Well, read me the language.
Marketing or selling at wholesale or retail of any products, so we're not prohibited by local regulation. We're not prohibited. And it says marketing includes agritourism. So agritourism is marketing, and since we,
That's not the definition of agritourism. Agritourism, which means attracting visitors to a farm to attend events and activities that are accessory uses to the primary farm operation, including but not limited to eating a meal, making overnight stays, enjoyment of the farm environment, education about farm operations, or active involvement in the activity of the farm. Given that these are accessory uses and potentially accessory retail uses, I don't think you can assume site plan review.
what you just read is from our proposed amendment, isn't it? It's not from the statute.
Th-
That's not what the statute says.
This is
But
what.
look, we're.
This is what I mean, my recollection is we picked this up from the definition of the state.
I have the statute here, and that's not what it says.
Can I
Look,
see your statute?
Of course you may.
Is there, I mean,
But look, we're
this new, it's
quarreling.
not in David's, is there new language that the state has passed that's not in
I
David's?
didn't bring the source material with me because we've been over this so many times, but I recall picking this up from the source.
Well, the statute was amended last year
Right.
to delete agritourism and put it into this section here.
They have a look here.
But,
So, yeah, you wanted to say more?
well, yeah, the important thing is that you and I agree on this matter. The question is how to proceed from here.
How would you recommend proceeding?
Well, I'd like to have a clear idea of your ideas, and then I'd like to try drafting something that is better than this. I don't think, as this is, you can't put this to the town. It's,
Well, actually, we could, but
well, you
you're
shouldn't.
saying you wouldn't like us to.
Well,
But what is your problem?
Well, among other things, the words existing agricultural uses.
Well, that's what we wanted to take out.
Yeah, okay.
But what else in substance?
Our goal is really to be able to regulate those things like the events and all that. I mean, Aaron Thompson came in for his farm stand,
Right.
right? And, you know, we wanna promote, we wanna keep farms and people farming, and if, you know, taking in people for bed and breakfast is something that's gonna help them do that. If, you know, to have farm stand where you would think a lot of the stuff is produced on site or, you know, affiliated with that farm operation, or it's local to Lyme, I mean, we wanna promote that. And so, yeah.
I understand and I agree with all that. I just think that this, I don't think it's well drafted. I think we can get to where we want to get with language that's clearer than this. I think.
Well, let me suggest this, rather than spending too much time on this particular one. We have time for the rehearing of this for the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't you submit your suggestion, and we can reconsider it at the second hearing
Good,
for this.
good.
Is that acceptable?
Absolutely.
Are there any objections?
No, I was gonna, just because, I just thought of this because, I wonder if A, being the right to farm, and then B is site plan review, required, or something like that, because that talks about the right, but you know, so it's kind of on that same, kind of looking to be parallel.
Right,
So
okay.
here's your right, but it is limited because you need to have, so maybe site plan review required. And it seemed like in the beginning of it, you know, we need to talk about agriculture, even though it is addressed at the very top, but say any new agricultural establishment, that at least gets you thinking agriculture in that sentence. Because any new establishment isn't modified by the word
Well,
agriculture.
Well, but it's any,
Well,
it's all a modifier for farm stand retail operation.
Really, or significant, because any new, is it any, well, then we have to say farm stand at the beginning or something, because it isn't clear to me that
Okay.
any new establishment could
Well,
be a
it's
pancake parlor.
it's fine with me, let's take the time to improve it.
Yeah,
Don't we want site plan review for any agritourism in any district?
Yes,
Yes.
I mean, that's what we're.
that's the
Yeah,
point,
that's
that's
what I thought.
really the
The
object.
object, right,
Yeah.
so that,
Yeah.
yeah, David can write up something.
and, yeah, so I would,
And I would
We should
suggest
we should just write what you said.
Yeah.
what he just said.
Yeah.
What did you just say?
so it should be,
We want site plan review for
Required.
any agritourism in any district. But David, you could write it, I'm sure, in a better
Yeah.
way.
We first should decide what we want. We want site plan review for agritourism, whatever that is.
Well, we define it up
Okay, we
there.
have a definition,
Yeah.
to be sure. But we also want to, you want site plan review for Christmas tree farms? You want site plan review for the woman who sells, whatever it is she sells across the road?
Well, this is relating particularly to agritourism, is really the point of it.
Okay.
But
We
the-
use, yeah,
I mean, the retail, the farm stand stuff, that's different from agritourism, or are we including that as agritourism?
well, that's up to the board, we had to this point.
Yeah.
We don't
It's
have
a-
a definition for farm stand.
It's very
It's
different.
not in here, those are different, and, my understanding of those activities is that those are different from,
Right, and that's, I mean, the discussion that David Robbins and I had was that this heading made no sense. And I agree, so we can improve this, we will await your submission
Thank you.
and take it from there,
I assume, next meeting is December 22nd.
December 22nd.
Yep.
Okay,
I believe that's, let me just double check my calendar, but it was,
The 23rd is a Friday, so the 22nd is a Thursday.
that would be then the 20th. What's today?
8th.
8th, 14, 22nd.
yeah, it's 22nd.
All right, so are we,
But what does that mean? We have, I will draft something
Yeah.
and circulate it. And
It needs to go in the paper, I think.
well, we can't actually, we can't,
Well, that's the thing, you need to have the
So I
language,
guess, yeah.
because I can't notice it
right.
without
So
language.
my question should be, if our first meeting in January will give us enough time.
Right, it's on the 12th, so
So-
that should be,
Yeah,
That's okay?
we meet on the
All right.
22nd.
So we can get your submission, the board can discuss it, and then we would still have time to have a hearing.
right.
All right, well, that was agritourism.
Aggravating tourism.
Yeah, so, after that, we have the conversions,
John, if I could just,
please.
Bob, did you read the amendment to 674-32?
674-32.
Who are you asking?
Oh, David?
David, I'm sorry,
That's okay. I answer to lots of things.
it's been a long day. But when they amended the agritourism thing, and in 674, which is basically agricultural uses of land,
Right.
New section, agritourism permitted, 674-32D. Agritourism permitted, agritourism as defined in RSA 2134A shall not be prohibited on any property where the primary use is for agriculture, subject to RSA 674-32B2.
Jay, thank you.
And that was one of the reasons that we said, let's define it
Right,
and say, and
right.
put it under site plan review.
I'd forgotten
And
about
that was
that.
where the language came up.
There's interaction between 674 and
Yeah,
32A, whatever it is.
but under 674, they basically said it is permitted, period.
Yeah,
Right.
thank you, that's what I was referring to, but did not have the source material. All right, nonetheless, so with that in mind, when you do remember 674.
Right.
All right, conversions, this came out of a request from the zoning board that we state the intent of this section because we state the intent of other sections. So the conversions clause stays the same. The wording added is the intent of section 446, which is the conversions clause, is to encourage the ongoing viability of Lyme's older buildings by allowing for their conversion to other uses.
John, I do have a question on that.
Please.
And I mentioned this to the board, but I wanted to say it again. Back in June of 1992, some developers came to the board and asked to change in the ordinance to allow conversions from 4 units to 6.
Right.
And I think if I may, I'd like to read the one paragraph, relevant paragraph from
I think you read it to us, but.
the minutes.
Read
And
it
so,
again.
Gerald Movell and Wayne Pike submitted to the board a proposal to increase the number of residential units allowed in the building from 4 to 6. This increase would make feasible Wayne's use of the former Green Mountain Studio building for apartments. They also suggested increasing the minimum floor area for a residential unit from 750 to 1,000 square feet. The board did not feel as though they wanted, the board did not feel as though the increase in square footage was necessary, since they wanted people to have the ability to create smaller units for single people, couples, single parents, and the elderly without the increased cost of a larger unit. The board felt the increase in number of units was reasonable as long as the ZBA reviewed septic, water, parking, et cetera, et cetera. Frida Swan made a motion to amend the zoning ordinance at the September 8th town meeting to increase the number 4 to 6, and it was seconded and unanimously approved. So, my question to the board is that statement of making units the conversion option for single people, couples, single parents, and the elderly, is that still the policy?
Well, the intent here is what came out of that's the 1992 board.
Mhm.
This is the 2000 and what year is it, 16 board.
Right.
So this is what we came out of, and part of the discussion was to be specific about this issue, because implicit in this issue, under this same clause, was all of the things that do qualify, such as this conversions to 6 units, which was, you're referring to there. So the intent, at least according to this board, is and also going back in history, was to encourage the ongoing viability of Lyme's older buildings by allowing for their conversions to other uses. The other uses listed in here are not exclusively that use, so that is one of them. Does that answer your question?
Well, I think that, I guess I don't understand why the ordinance needs the explication to.
Because the zoning board requested it and we're doing it as a courtesy. They felt it would be helpful to them.
It's not clear to me how that would help them make operational decisions. I think that was the gist of their request, that they wanted to know.
What would you suggest?
I thought the language from 1992 was an interesting reason,
What's the reason for
To convert.
increasing the numbers,
yes.
not for the reason for having conversions?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So the purpose of a conversion is not to help make it more affordable, but to protect older buildings.
Back when the ordinance was drafted, yes.
Implicit in the intent are the uses listed. If you read it in context,
Mm-hmm.
So it's not an either or.
no, not to my mind.
Right, well, that's all you can say.
Yeah. Any other questions? Anything?
Any other
All right.
comments?
Well, so now it's time to move this to the town, if we so desire. What's everybody's pleasure? Apparently not any pleasure. Does anybody want to move this? No motion to move this to?
I'll move it to
I'll be
town.
happy with it. I don't care that much about this.
Right, well, I mean, the zoning board did ask us to do this. I don't really want anything to be so, I didn't think that this would be controversial, actually. But this is something we decided on, and I'll make a motion.
We don't have to, I mean, it's fine with me. Okay, well, I got a second.
Take it to town meeting is my motion.
Okay, and we got a second. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed, okay. So that is going to the town. Signs, okay, this is like I'm not gonna read this, because this just goes on forever. There was was it a Supreme Court decision?
Yes.
The Supreme Court decision that content could not be regulated in signage. So all of the sections in the ordinance that related to issues of content were removed. And the rest basically stays the same, if my understanding is correct.
We did not have an intent to change anything else, but just to make it.
We had
content
no
neutral.
interest in going anywhere near this, but
Right.
we had to make it consistent with the law. Does anybody have anything on that one?
I want to say personally, I appreciate it because Thetford is struggling with a sign ordinance, so thank you. That's good.
Are you doing the same thing?
There's no response, there's no Supreme Court order, but we don't
Oh,
have a
you're in
sign
Vermont,
ordinance
right,
at all,
okay,
right,
okay.
and
Well,
so.
it makes it
there-
even harder if
It
you're
makes it
starting
even
from
harder.
scratch.
Right.
Yeah, so thank you.
All right. All right, is anybody excited enough to make a motion on this?
Oh, there isn't any comment on this at all?
Well, I don't know.
Okay.
Didn't seem to be. We had a comment.
Okay, thank you.
We had a thank you. Which- That doesn't happen too long. Don't push your luck. Doesn't happen too
I
often.
think Tim had a motion,
Yeah.
Did you have a
I'll
motion?
move this, yes.
and I'll second it.
All right, all those in favor, aye. All those opposed, or that's going to town meeting. And dwelling unit. This came out of us noticing that we had two mints in one. We had two definitions
They
of.
weren't identical though, they
Yeah.
were fraternal.
Two unidentical mints in one.
Agritourism, I have
We had a
twice
definition
in there, so
in
at the very end. All
the,
right, thank you.
in the zoning ordinance, and we had one in the subdivision regulations, which were different. So this was to make them consistent, or to have one that would be,
To make them identical,
Same.
not fraternal.
right.
Yeah.
And the language was a combination of what we thought was best, and also the definition that was used by the state to define a dwelling unit relating to accessory dwelling units. So it reads, a room or rooms providing independent living facilities for one or more persons, including provisions for sleeping, eating, cooking, and sanitation that is established for regular occupancy. It's not that much different than the one we have, but it's better, in my opinion, anyway. Does anybody have any comments on that?
I hate this thing, and I've always been confused about why, doesn't sanitation mean cleaning, and
You
it's
know,
nothing to do with personal hygiene, okay, so.
I looked it up, and actually, I think it says in the accessory dwelling unit explanation of the definition, it's that NHMA thing that you sent.
Mhm,
It states that there are 4 pillars
mhm,
to the table of what establishes a dwelling unit.
right.
And one of those pillars, one of the legs of the table is sanitation.
They just call it sanitation.
They call it
I just
sanitation.
think it's so non-descriptive, but for
I
what
think-
it is actually
I think
meant,
we can infer.
but, well, yes. Right.
Yeah, it's sanitizing.
It sounds like a broom closet or something like that, not a
What
bathroom.
would you prefer?
Yeah, but I'm not going there, okay, so I hate this thing, so I already told you, I'm happy to take whatever you guys
You hate it?
I do, but let's just.
This is the first I
yeah,
heard
let's
that
just
you
hear what
hate it.
other people, I mean, it's gonna, let's just hear what other people have to say about it.
What do other people have to say?
I think it's great. I know what sanitation means,
Yeah, I think
Okay.
it's.
so do all of you.
Yeah.
I believe so. Any other comments?
Well, if it said indoor plumbing, wouldn't that,
Well, because you don't have to have indoor plumbing, you could have one of those electric toilets. You know, I know somebody who has the electric toilet, that's interesting.
what
And you
about
could- you could al-
provisions for wastewater disposal?
Isn't that what sanitation means?
Yeah,
I think you got me, Eric.
it's a,
That's how I
it's,
take it to be.
I think it's a more general term that would cover more ways of disposing of unwanted material.
You're warming to it, I can tell.
Frank Zappa had a great phrase for it, but I'm not gonna go there. Okay, any other comments? All right. As one
No,
who hates this,
No,
do you?
I'll-
no, it's his
All
turn.
right, and who would like to second that? Okay.
Oh.
All those in favor say aye, and all those opposed
Job.
don't say anything. All right, those are all of the current zoning amendments. So, the conversions, the signage, and the dwelling unit are going to town. The agritourism is still in
On the
play.
drawing board, yes.
And it is, according to the agenda, it is now the Heritage Commission's turn to say what they have to say. Please come down and join us, Heritage Commission. We'd love to have you at the table.
We've come out in full force tonight. I didn't bring hundreds of these, but perhaps you
It's okay, we can
are used to sharing.
Now, are you on the Heritage
I
Commission?
am.
You
Now-
might
now-
have to recuse yourself.
Yes, I
You can
think that might be a good
Ray,
idea.
I'll
Share
give you-
that with the,
Ray, I'll give you this too.
But you're certainly, if you would like to comment, you're welcome to comment. And you can, no, you can sit here, we'll just keep an
Just
eye
have
on you.
David, you
Well,
noted that
Tim,
Jim
since
received.
you read that, how about if you address those issues? Let's see, well, we are here in force. I don't think we have you outnumbered, but maybe in spirit. You've all seen our proposal before. This is a request to review applications for demolition of historic structures. It came up once before, there was discussion about it. I think it came back to us with a comment that perhaps it was a little broad and maybe too cumbersome for the planning board or town officials to have to deal with. And we chewed that over. And we are, of course, our mission, we're a bunch of wackos, as you know. We feel passionate about older homes and structures, and we don't like to see them torn down or modified excessively. We feel that our heritage is limited, it's precious, and we're losing them. I think that since the Heritage Commission has been playing our game, we've probably lost about 6 or 7 houses. Some of them are by natural causes of fire or whatever. Some of them have reached the useful end of their life and need to be torn down, and some we feel are perhaps worthy of considering for architectural or historic reasons, significant enough to consider preserving.
I just wanted to ask that, and this isn't strictly informationally, because I don't know enough about it, but so, like, the 6 or 7 over the, how long?
Well, we've been in force for 5 years.
5
5 years. So 6 or 7, and some of them were through fire or attrition, basically.
Mhm.
So, I guess in considering this, one thing I'd kind of like to get a perspective of of what's actually been going on. So, of those, what were ones that you would really have been able to apply your desired ordinance to? And of those, how many do you think the ordinance might have been effective in actually getting a result?
Well, I can name one in particular, which would be the Poor Farm.
I know that.
And I think we did the town a disservice by not making the owners aware of the fact that actually they could have kept that house, had they been willing to jump through a few more hoops.
So I guess, what kept the Heritage, it's the Heritage Commission, the second word I don't, but it's commission.
It is.
The Heritage Commission, what kept the Heritage Commission to going to the greengrocers?
Yes.
And without this, what kept you from going to them and saying, save this, it's important?
Well, we did, but at that point, their application had already been approved. They were mentally and contractually committed to tearing the house down. So it was a little late at that point.
And was that a missed opportunity
And
because?
please interrupt me if I'm
Was
misstating anything.
was that a missed opportunity because you didn't have this triggering mechanism? What caused the missed opportunity?
Well, I think the greengrocers are good people. I really admire them and their intentions and what they're doing for the town. But I think had we been able to present, let's say, a cogent argument for why they should consider saving that house, in addition to building the house that they really wanted to build, I think they might have entertained it.
No, that I understand. I'm just trying to get a sense of, was it a missed opportunity because you didn't know that this was going on? Would having had this ordinance in place gotten you in there earlier?
Well, our ordinance has no teeth.
I understand that,
It's-
but
it's simply a
you would be
review process.
notified.
Yeah,
Yeah, if I may say, I
Please.
think it was very easy to dismiss the Heritage Commission's concerns at that time because there was no mention of it in the ordinance. There was no recognized statement of value other than in the master plan, which has the lovely language.
Right.
But there was no statement of value that this is part of the identity of our town. This is one of the things that helps us recognize that we're here in Lyme and that this is what's special about it. And they aren't building old buildings anymore, sorry. He does a very good job of, but, you know what
past
I mean.
tense.
Yeah, so I think without that, official, just let's stop and talk, there was nothing to prevent them from taking it down, and I don't think our ordinance's suggestion is meant to obstruct that, other than to just give okay, let's all talk, and then go ahead with your plans.
I'm just trying to get an idea of how much of a difference it will make, whether it'll really, whether it's something that will have a different outcome than if there was none. And that's why I was asking, if this had been in the ordinance at the time, the greengrocers, before they were contractually obligated, do you feel you could have gotten a different result? Because of this?
I think we might have stood a much better chance,
Okay,
and I think with the building of that value, a
Okay.
chance was important.
that's what I'm trying to understand.
We're only advocates, John, we're not,
Regulators.
Please.
yeah, we're not the police, and I understand there is a resistance to any further regulation, and I appreciate that. But, there are people who feel passionate about these issues. If we were the Conservation Commission and somebody came to you and said, I'd like to fill in that wetland area, and you'd say, well, now, hang on a minute, the Conservation Commission should really they care about these natural habitats. Let's see how they feel about it.
I'm sympathetic to your goals. I'm trying to just get a sense of what a good balance would be, yeah.
My concern is a little bit like yours, and I worry that by the time they come for a zoning permit or a site plan, they've got plans, they've gone to a bank, they've, spent a ton of money with architects and designers, and that we're catching them too late by the time they've got plans to come forward. And so, maybe we need a way to recognize here, but I don't think that this is gonna catch them. What we need to do is catch them at the time that the property's transferred and get information to the new owner about how important that property is. And
We agree with that too.
so,
And we do that. We try to get out what is it, a welcome to Lyme package.
Whenever we hear
That
that
doesn't
a
necessarily
property is being transferred.
address their specific property,
Yeah.
saying,
Right.
this,
Yeah, I think.
this house was built in 1776, that served as the town's poor farm
Exactly.
for 100 years,
yeah,
to give them, you're right, it's probably a little bit.
But in that particular case, as soon as we knew that property had transferred, we sent them copies of
We
all
did.
the writings
We
that
tried.
we had, yeah, but without any kind of official, place to hang our hat in the ordinance, like the Conservation Commission has. And we have expertise that is comparable to what the Conservation Commission has about environmental issues. There was no way to have it taken seriously, other than, isn't that nice, they're watching.
Because I think now, Vicki,
Mhm.
we don't know what until the demolition, there's an application for a demolition permit.
yeah, but that's,
And that, right, but I mean, at
that's
least,
too late. They've already got plans, and they've already decided, yeah,
Right.
it's gonna be more cost effective, or our architect, because, well, I didn't wanna go how
Well,
that
I
usually
think-
works.
I think
agree,
it's a
but-
good
I
point.
agree with you,
That's
but-
my problem, but can I just say one thing is that, so there's zoning ordinances about public health and safety, which makes it different from the wetland situation, because we've got, we rely on water and that type of thing. So I wonder if there's a different way that there could be intervention. The other point I wanted to make is that if you can go in a friendly way, providing information, they may be much more likely, and to say, maybe we can get you grants, much more likely to cooperate than if it's a regulatory thing that they have to go through, and this is causing us 30 days of delay, and so I'm just trying to
But
respond
we
to.
do that.
Yeah,
We
well.
try to.
Yeah,
It's both and.
it's tricky though, because
Right.
if when somebody buys an old house in town and you go
Okay,
to them, and then but it's hard to say to them, well, are you thinking about tearing this down? You know what I mean? It's hard to say,
Well, here's
There's
another
another
example.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to think if there's a different way to be able to get you guys, with some, I believe you have authority, you're a heritage commission. It's an official body, and your job is to encourage the preservation of our historic resources and to let people know, build historic resources and to let people know about them. So
Well,
that's your
thank you for
job.
acknowledging that. And we're not the only town, we wouldn't be the only town in New Hampshire to have this ordinance. I think a lot more should have it. But we're far from the first. How many, Tim, are there in the state?
Northampton, Laconia, Concord, Keene, Rye, Exeter, Hampton Falls, Belmont. Those are just, I don't know if that's all of them or not, but those are the ones that are
Peterborough
listed here.
also.
Peterborough?
I don't really care how many others have it, but, cause,
Well, it's a.
Well, so,
yeah,
Vicki, let me give you an example
Yeah.
right now.
but I
So-
wondered if there's some more effective way.
So
you know, we're-
so the Allen's house just had a fire.
Oh, yeah.
And I haven't been in touch with them, although I did email them. We are all concerned, the Heritage Commission, about what their intention is. Have they submitted a building permit?
They have not.
So are they within their rights to tear it down?
They would need a permit to tear it down.
And
For-
would they need a permit in order to do the major remodeling that it might need?
Yes, they should be getting a permit for that.
So we're sort of in between, and neither we nor you know what their intention is. So that's a perfect opportunity, when their building permit does come in, to say, you know what, at least talk to the Heritage Commission, because they might think you really have a chance to save this place. Or
Yeah,
even if
well,
you've given up on the house, perhaps
just
there's material
how much have
there.
they already spent in engaging, the people to come and advise them? And of course, the people that you're gonna contact to advise are gonna be the ones that are gonna make it easy for themselves, so the tear down is a whole lot easier, and you know that, and,
You know, I
Well,
don't think
I-
that house is gonna be torn down, I'm gonna say that.
well, I hope not.
Yeah,
And,
well, you have a chance to do something
Right,
about that.
right, and the other is that, that house isn't exactly in the best location on the lot. If there are other places, on the lot, I might wanna be there. They're on a very busy corner. And,
If you wanted to pick it up and move it, I think we'd all agree with that.
right, right, well, yeah, I wish that it wouldn't come to regulation. I think regulation tries to do so
Well,
much, and if it doesn't have
If this
the outcome.
review ordinance were in effect,
Mhm.
any builder, any architect would be foolish not to make themselves aware of what Lyme's ordinances are,
Mhm.
because we all know that this is not an easy town to build in. And they would read the documents and they would say, aha, you know what? We really need to apply, there may be a slight delay here. I'm not even,
Well, see, that's the bad part, is the slight delay. If you can change their mind, that, and have a positive outcome.
is there any building permit application that's made it through the planning board in under 30 days?
We don't see building permit applications at all.
Well,
We
I
don't see
mean,
even one.
but I'm making a point, and I think it's a valid one, Vicki. Nothing happens quickly in this town, so 30 days is not gonna delay their application.
Don't look at me, you look at David, because he issues the permits. I have no idea how long it takes to turn one around, so.
I mean, it depends on, a lot of times turn around in the very same day,
Mhm.
so, but,
Well, I think we say in here that actually, we will review it, and make a determination within 10 business days.
Mhm.
And the 30 days only kicks in if, let's say the Hamilton House at the end of the green, were proposed to be torn down for whatever reason. How would you all feel about that? Would you wanna have some
Good.
oversight of that, or you wouldn't
Well,
care?
we don't, you guys do, yeah.
Well, you have the opportunity
We
to.
don't,
Right.
at all.
We're
We
advisory
can go
only.
and we can beg and we can.
And we wouldn't even be aware of it
Here's what,
unless this ordinance.
one thing I would like to say is that really we're commenting blind because we just got, I've never read this.
Mhm.
No,
I didn't get it.
I thought we had a prior.
You had a prior,
informal
There is a
thing.
prior thing that,
We did, I remember seeing a draft of it,
Yeah.
This is,
the draft, I
Yeah,
don't
this, I
remember.
gave a
Tim
draft.
brought one
Yeah,
weeks ago, yeah.
I didn't see the draft.
Yeah.
We,
That's-
I got
based on your feedback on that, we, the state definition of historic is anything 50 years or older.
Mhm.
So that would be 1966. There admittedly are not a lot of, let's say, what most of us would consider important historic homes built, sort of between 1966 and the period that we chose, which is prior to the beginning of World War II. Construction sort of stopped. There was a lot of change in craftsmanship and materials as well at the start of World War II. And we felt that that was as good a cutoff as any.
Mhm.
We also run the political risk of choosing who our winners and losers are. And we didn't want to say, okay, you can do whatever you want to this house, you can tear it down without any review.
Mhm.
But this house over here, we really like,
Mhm.
So 1940, instead of 50 years, we're saying 76 years.
Yes.
I think that that's a good point. I think we should have higher standards here,
Because-
we can.
Well, I think that was the feedback we
Well,
got.
the feedback was
Yeah.
that 50, including every house that was
Yeah.
50 years
Yeah.
older.
every structure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
structure.
So how many structures are there in town?
Structures,
Yeah.
don't know.
Homes,
There's
residences,
800.
barns,
Aren't
outbuildings?
there 870 assessment properties? Because that
I think
doesn't mean, that
that
doesn't.
would be residential, but that doesn't include.
I can look at that, I can get that information.
I'm gonna guess that structures is probably over 1,000, if you're looking at
Probably.
outbuildings and barns.
Probably.
And of those, I'm gonna say, I think in our historic survey, which we completed, I think we came up with 324,
24,
was it?
something like that.
So I'm,
So like 30% or so.
yeah, so I'm guessing that probably we're about 275 or so, maybe even a little bit shy of that, that are properties that would be, or buildings that might be affected by this ordinance.
So you're talking about structures, is that what it says in your,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, somewhere, I would guess somewhere over 1,000 from what I.
So probably 25% of those without doing an actual.
Well,
analysis.
I'd like to actually read this.
I don't blame him.
So, hold it, this is a new ordinance, and it's not an add-on to the zoning? I don't get, it's because it's labeled ordinance, so it would be more of a new article in the zoning ordinance, is that what your
Well,
thought was? Or
I
do you
guess
want-
our hope is that you could tack this on to the changes that you have just previously discussed this evening.
So it would be an amendment to the zoning ordinance?
Yeah,
A
and
new
then-
article called Historic Structures Demolition Review.
Yeah, that's right. And the town would have an opportunity to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
So, and is this demolition, just a portion of the building gets demolished, or the entire thing? What is demolition defined as?
That's where I was gonna ask the question, because in your, the procedure, what is, if the building or portion of the building, that, to me, makes perfect sense where you have, you know, have an historic building that is an addition that is not historic. So you may not care that the non-historic portion is being worked on, but the historic portion, you do care. I assume that's the reason for differentiating between the two. Unfortunately, I don't have a good way of knowing what, where that line is drawn in a building. So that's something that,
But we have that expertise, and you already know which houses or structures are built prior to 1940.
right, I have your list,
Yeah.
which, easy enough to grab from that. And then the tax card also has a date that the building was built. But again, that's, when I see a building, that if has a major addition that is not part of that history, I don't know when that addition was put on.
But I think that
Understood.
when you.
So there's- that would be-
They'd apply for a demolition permit, then you would just pass that on to the Heritage Commission. It wouldn't matter to you whether it was the old part or the new part. We would go and look at it, and if it was the new part, we would just say,
Yeah,
fine.
and that's,
Then it would be done and would.
well, that's right, that's where this would need some, I think under the procedure, that would just need to be cleaned up a little bit, because that, you know, putting it on me to make the decision of, is that portion, and so I think it would have to
Gotcha.
be clear that
Yeah,
anytime somebody wants to do a demolition, then it goes to the Heritage Commission. The other question I have is, when you say demolition, well, actually in this it says demolition or building permit.
Where are you reading from?
The under procedure, the very first line.
Or a building permit involving demolition.
Oh, is that what it's
yeah, it
Yeah.
wouldn't be any.
I apologize if that isn't.
No, that's not clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
That's
wouldn't
why
be.
we
So when an application or, do you want to say when an application or a building permit is made for demolition?
Well, I think it's actually clear, when an application is made, or a building permit, or a site plan review involving demolition, I mean, that doesn't seem to be that obtuse to me, but.
When an application is made for a demolition permit or a building permit, well, I mean, actually, if I read this very literally, the or a building permit kind of stands on its own, the or site
It's
plan.
comma, with.
Yeah, I mean,
with
I think this line, what you wanna have all this leading to is involving a demolition.
Mhm.
Otherwise,
Right, 'cause
it can be misread.
Yeah.
Yeah, we certainly don't want.
I'm
any
gonna
building.
agree with you. I think that is confusing.
What if we just got rid of that or a building permit and just said, when an application is made for a demolition permit or a site plan review involving demolition?
Well, here's the question, the question I really had about that is, when you say demolition, are you talking about complete removal, or are you talking about, when I think of demolition in building construction, that could mean going into a building, gutting it, and redoing the entire interior.
Right, what does demolition mean?
Right,
I thought-
that's,
yeah. Or do you take down the exterior structure? What is that?
Why
What
don't
is
you just
that?
say full or partial?
Well,
Full
what
or
is,
partial demolition.
But David, if somebody, this is a question, if somebody wants to, say, got 2 rooms in their house and replace all the woodwork and whatever, do they need a building permit to do that?
In most
If they're just
cases,
replacing.
if they're just replacing, no, but if they're going in and moving walls around or trying to put in new materials, upgrade,
Yeah.
then
they need a
yes,
building.
they need a building permit.
And that's not a demolition, that wouldn't be a demolition permit,
No.
that would just be a building permit.
That would just be,
So that gets a little complicated.
it's actually called a zoning permit. We don't actually issue building permits, which is a technicality to get around some of the state laws for having to have a building inspector.
So that wording needs work.
Yeah, so my question really is, do you want to include renovations that could change the interior of the house?
Ideally, I
That's,
think we would.
again, and that's up to you, I'm not,
my house was a total demolition
I remember it well.
of the interior. Well, I mean, and hopefully I did
You
the
were
right thing,
crazy.
cause yeah, we're right, everybody would have said you should have demolished this building rather than trying to work with it the way it is. And that's why I'm saying, like, I should have totally torn down the whole thing, and so what's left of it is, I mean, the walls are still there.
Good job.
Shower wall renovation.
Right, but no, I'm serious though, I mean, in terms of demolition, I mean, a lot of the historic stuff that was maybe the only good part of my house did get demolished. And so, I mean, but the building form is all the same. So what are you trying to get at? Cause I think my house is an excellent example because, the best part was some of the beadboard, the, woodwork that was on the inside
So-
and that.
I'm speaking individually and not
Yeah.
for the Heritage Commission, but I think, as the saying goes, best is the enemy of good. I think if we can accomplish anything here, let's call it the absolute removal of a building.
So that would
And if we
be
could stop
exterior
that,
structure removed.
That would be a
Yeah.
great benefit, I feel, to the future of the town. If you left it up to some of us, we'd tell you white is the only color you can paint your house. But we don't think that's gonna happen. But I do think, reasonable controls over demolition of historic structures is a worthwhile way to preserve what we have here in town.
David, I wanna ask you, because at the last go-around, we talked about this and its impact on you, and one of the things we felt would be helpful would, get away from the 50-year thing. Does this make you any more comfortable having the 1940?
well, this is something I can work with. This
Okay,
is
that's
something I
what I
can
wanna-
see, I have a list of buildings, and very easy when I go to do a permit for this, to have, I have everything set up in an access database on a form. I already have your inventory in place so that when somebody gets a permit, your inventory spits out of the printer with the permit. I don't even see it, it just comes out, they're on the list, and I give it to them. So adding something that,
Wow, we
Yeah.
don't know that.
yeah,
I didn't know
So it's at least substantially better than it was for you.
yes,
So what I'd like to suggest is that we all have a chance to read this,
Chew it over.
and you too, based on what you've heard here tonight. And then if you can, all of you or some of you or more of you, come back and talk about it.
Can you guys put a definition together that we could put in the definition section that says what does demolition mean?
Mhm.
So that that's very clear. And then the other is, I really haven't looked at this, I mean, I don't even have my own copy to look at here, but I'm wondering what you mean by public meeting, when you want those people, and during the 30-day period, the Heritage Commission shall meet with the property owner and conduct such public meetings as it may determine to be necessary. So is that gonna be like and pardon me, but I'm gonna just be, that's not gonna be a public shaming of this person. I mean, when you say public meeting, are you gonna notify the abutters and have them all come and?
Thought about
you know,
having them wear a scarlet
That's what I
D.
thought,
And
so,
that just,
yeah, no, but
seemed
do we need to have that requirement for public meetings in there?
well, the Heritage Commission meets in public anyway.
So it wouldn't be a zoning hearing that you're asking for here, not a public
No.
hearing?
No, I don't think so.
So we need to work
but I
on
think
what that is.
We don't wanna make it a private meeting either.
Well,
We're not trying to shame.
You guys can only meet in a public session, so you would have to post, but I don't know that we need to have that in here, because we do have public hearing requirements in the zoning,
Yeah.
and that's not what we're having here. We're having you guys are doing whatever research and meetings you would need,
Mhm.
and you have to meet in public session, so if we can just, that would make me
Well,
feel.
I mean, it's a good point. Would we be required to meet in public in order to make a determination about whether a house?
Yes, you
Yes,
guys,
you
all your
absolutely.
meetings are in public.
Yes,
You're
yes,
saying
and
not
that's,
a- not a
that's,
special public meeting, just a regular.
I'm just
Heritage
saying, it's a
Commission
heritage meeting where we
That's
don't have to notify abutters through, all land use stuff, you
Well,
notify
what have you
abutters.
just said, and conduct such Heritage Commission meetings and research as may, you know,
But we would have to have a
Is it-
special meeting probably, because we only meet once a month.
but that'd be fine,
So.
that wouldn't be a
That would be
contradiction.
Well,
within
you
the
guys are,
30
but
day
you're setting
period.
yourself up for that
Right,
anyway, with
right,
the 10
right.
day.
No, I mean,
Well,
that's
that's
fine, but we'd
the-
have to
Doesn't want
notice
to be
that meeting.
responsive.
Exactly.
that's what I was actually gonna go back to see with the 10 days. It would have to be a decision of the commission. It would not be something where I could send it to you and you say, nah, don't care, and, so
Right.
within that 10 days, it should be, and it should be spelled out here, that the Heritage Commission will hold a meeting
Mhm.
Yeah.
to make that preliminary
Or
decision.
that, I mean, for practical purposes, if you don't hear back, you know, say everybody on the Heritage Commission is away.
Mhm.
If you don't hear back in 10 days, then
Well, I
that's,
think
that's,
that there is a time limit on this as well,
That's
I
right.
believe.
30
Yeah,
days.
30 days.
Yeah.
But Dave, that meeting would have to be noticed, right?
Yes, it would.
And how long is that?
You have to, I believe it's
24
hours.
Okay, so
Oh,
just.
24 hours.
That's a requirement.
So it'd have to be a notice meeting 24 hours in advance to, you know, to make that preliminary decision.
Yeah.
My other issue, just as a practical one, is how do we go about forwarding an application, making sure that if you're on vacation and you're not around, that,
Goes to me.
Just the vice chair.
well, again, not knowing, if I don't know you're out of town,
Mhm.
I send it to you, it goes into your email,
Junk mail.
it could,
But do you have a Heritage Commission, I mean, can you just, you know, for your
Do you
email,
have a
just
list?
email the list?
well, that's,
Instead of- yeah.
yeah, that would be something that would be, you know, and then is,
Instead of Ray's name, just would go Heritage Commission.
I could create an email
So we'll go to all
list that
of us.
would go to everybody. I would need to make
Everybody.
sure that that list is maintained and updated, just because, you know, emails change rapidly enough.
Sure,
Right.
but once
Oh.
a year,
Well,
election.
I think by all means do review this and make whatever suggestions you think are appropriate. This is sort of pulled together from the state's ordinances, which they have used in other towns. And it was a good starting point, but it may not be the appropriate one for Lyme, so please.
Do you guys have rules, I mean, I think it'd be helpful for you guys to have a written policy or procedure about how you deal with this, because then we could take out some of the stuff that's here in the zoning. I mean, all this needs to be voted on by town meeting, otherwise it doesn't pass. And
Right.
if there are things like, you know, that people don't, you know, make them feel not happy,
Mhm.
they're gonna vote it down. And so, as much as we can to simplify this and what you could put into your own policies and procedures, then you
That's a
could
very
just
good
run
point.
it however you want.
Well,
So I
I'd
don't
love to
know.
know what we
Well, yeah,
can
I
do.
don't- yeah.
This started as a 3-page
Yeah.
Well, the
document.
trend is looking good.
Yeah.
But-
Well, maybe some of
but
this content that went away, in terms of how you review it,
Maybe
would
needs
go
to come back
into
in.
your policies and
Our policies.
procedures,
Yeah.
which is only fair for, the applicant to know what, that you guys aren't,
Well,
Yeah.
you're pointing to the fact that we're still a juvenile commission.
We are learning.
We're new,
Yeah.
and we're not a heritage, we're not a historic district commission
Mhm.
with a full thing of,
right,
thou shalt not
regulations,
put
yeah.
bottle curtains in your windows.
But the other thing is, do you guys have any access to funds to help people who want to do the right thing, but, really can't
We
see their
have
way?
established an historic assets fund, which
Mhm.
currently has a little over $5,000 in it.
Mhm,
It's not enough to rebuild the Allen's house,
mhm.
if they came to us, but I think it is enough to possibly hire an architect, or we're all sort of engaged enough in this
Right.
process that we're willing to go
Right.
and help people in any way we can too.
Cause I think having that professional team to be able to be there, to, somebody new to town, they don't know, they got the name of a builder from their real estate agent, and that's what they're gonna do, cause that's all they know.
Well,
And,
I'm just,
Being able to help them out is,
not to pat ourselves on the back,
Yeah.
but we have been available to homeowners who have approached us and had,
right,
multiple opportunities to offer advice to them.
mhm,
And I think it's been useful. We've even found salvage materials from houses that were being torn down, if you can imagine. And found other suitable homes in town
mhm,
where they could reuse it. I
Mhm.
mean,
yeah,
that's unfortunately as good as it gets sometimes.
yeah.
All right, so let's wrap this up. We're gonna, everybody on the board, will have the opportunity to go over this.
Does everyone have a copy to
No.
take? Let me go make a couple of photocopies.
I
And,
do have some.
John, can I
Here,
just
let's
wanna
see,
add,
there are-
go back to what you said at the beginning, I just really appreciate, and this is, again, me speaking personally, but I really appreciate what you said about both the encouragement as well as the, an ordinance. I think that we need to have an ordinance so that there's something there for people to see, but we would love suggestions or all that about coming in at the very beginning, and you're right about making a new owner, especially someone who's brand new to town, informed about the importance of their house or the date or any of that.
Right,
And
We could
we
start,
don't know what the best procedure is, so. we
start
would
with the
love-
real estate broker who has the
Mhm.
listing. As soon as something goes on the market, identify it, talk with the broker, so that they can.
So they know.
So that they know, so
Well,
that they
it's
can
a-
tell their.
But how do you do
benefit
that?
to
We don't know.
to their sales, to say this is really, historically significant.
Yeah,
Yeah, a
maybe we
couple
have
of
that,
times we've
yeah.
been able to do that, and we've actually provided the broker with a write-up about
Right.
the house,
Mhm.
nicely
Mhm.
formatted,
Yeah.
so that they could, all they had to do is just
Right.
hand it to the
Right.
prospective
But we don't have a
buyer.
way of knowing that necessarily unless we hear it.
Yeah, we get lucky.
We
Yeah.
do
And then
have a
what do you-
realtor on the commission, which
Oh,
is an
that's good.
advantage.
Yeah.
But that means we get
But
her
we-
listings, but not.
Right, we hand out that letter that we wrote
Yes.
to all new
Thank
Yeah.
you.
owners, right?
Yes, I believe that's our intent, whether we're actually reaching them all.
Well, I wonder if some of your assets, fund couldn't go
Anybody need-
to giving people that kind of specific write-up once they own it, and maybe patterns and pieces, or, one of the historian's books or something like that, just to say, or a free year-long subscription to your newsletter, or, free tour around the
you
new, museum, please come, that type of thing, get them early, hooked on it.
As you know, there's not a lot of funding at the state
Oh,
or
there's
federal
none,
level.
that's why
So,
it to have some local
we're-
fund.
this has all been
Yep.
locally sourced,
Yep.
locally grown.
Yep, yep,
So,
Yeah, the other thing to remember, Rick, is that we have no power. In other words, we can talk to people, but if they say,
yep,
we don't wanna talk to you, forget it,
yep.
then it's done. I mean,
Yep.
all we can do is suggest stuff.
Yeah,
So,
The same way with this demolition ordinance, if they don't wanna abide by, you know, what we say, they can tear it down anyway.
so this
Yeah.
is now turning into a demolition article, which will be a part of the zoning ordinance. So we need to,
All right, so.
Talk about it, yes.
So, let's meet next time,
yep,
and, we'll be ready for you then. All right, thank you.
thank you.
So that's on the
Thank you for
22nd.
allowing us the
22nd.
opportunity, and so our best case hope is that we might present this to the town this year. If that doesn't work, we don't wanna present something that.
No, you don't wanna present something
that the
bad.
planning board is not willing to support,
Right.
so.
I think it's conceivable that could happen, but we'll see how. it
We'll
goes.
see, yep.
Okay. David, did you want this back?
No, you can have that.
I don't want, I really don't want
Lori,
it.
you're, the realtor is on the board, gets all the multiple listings. She or he knows everything.
Rich and Liz?
Thank you all.
Absolutely.
Sorry,
Thank
I'm
you.
just talking historic preservation.
Yeah, good point. Yes, Jane Aiken.
Oh,
Yeah,
Jane knows everything that goes on the board.
good point, thank you.
That's not my pen, that's.
So maybe that's the sign-in pen. The sign-in pen.
I don't think we've met before, could you introduce yourself?
How do you do? I just found your polar bear egg the other day.
No,
Yes, it's-
it hasn't, it's not broken?
It hasn't broken yet, I
You
know.
haven't hurled it against the wall?
No, it's lovely. You didn't even do it.
he sticks it with pins.
It's
Egg.
not the polar egg, it's the
voodoo egg.
sweetest egg. If you guys can share, maybe David could get rid of these or something like that. This is, you don't have to look at it right now, but
What is this?
I will tell you, surprise. So,
Here you go, I don't want it.
we always appreciate the time you give us. When we started, we hoped that we would persuade you guys to come up with your own language to help address the cost of housing in town and a way to build, that would support aging in your home. And in the alternative, we hoped, and we still hope, that we can give you language. Oh yeah, this is about the
Oh, I
pocket
haven't
ordinance.
seen it.
Oh, let's wait, make sure everybody's on the same page.
So I did send it out to everyone.
Yeah, I've got, well, I've got the pocket ordinance. And this is about the pocket ordinance?
This is right, this is just sort of,
So
I'll
this
show
is-
you this afterwards, this is, you don't have to read this.
Yeah, I'm not gonna
until-
read this
no,
now.
Okay, So in the alternative, we hoped, and we still hope, that we can propose some language that you guys will, if you're not advancing it as your own language, can at least support. So that's what we were doing all fall, we made 2 proposals, neither of those contained any ideas or language you guys could support. But we've listened very carefully. So what we've come to you with tonight is what we think of as a very modest proposal called for pocket neighborhoods. And what we're looking for is your feedback on this proposal. You may see things we can change to make it better. And maybe you'll even say, ah, brilliant, you finally come up with something that we can support. This is as simple as we can make it, and we can walk through it with you. Our intention is to follow all existing Lyme regulations with one exception. And that is, in a limited part of town, the number of homes allowed on a parcel would increase from 2 to 6. That's the change. And the rest of it sets out where it would be on Route 10 only. A lot of road frontage within a mile of the common, the Lyme Common District. Only on parcels that have a lot size, a computed lot size, which is what Lyme does, greater than 15 acres. We would use the same rules for counting lots. We'd use the same rules for building footprint, lot coverage, gross floor area, so that what could be built in the pocket neighborhood wouldn't be any larger than what is currently allowed for large single-family homes. We'd have the same rules on accessory buildings, the same rules on driveways. We do propose that the permitted footprint be divided into multiple buildings so that we can have homes that are appropriate to the character and scale of the town. And we require in any of this development, any pocket neighborhood, that there's significant common space dedicated to all residents. So that's the summary of what this is. Love you for that.
Well, you came to the right place.
All right, good.
Well, does anybody wanna go? I always go first, somebody else will go first, why don't you go first?
Well, I did a little research into spot zoning, because I really wasn't sure what that was. And it seems like this might come under spot zoning. If I may, let me just read a definition of spot zoning. It says, spot zoning is the application of zoning to a specific parcel or parcels of land within a larger zoned area, excuse me, when the rezoning is usually at odds with the city's master plan and current zoning restrictions. Now, in the master plan, in section 1.9, it says, multifamily buildings are not favored. Conversion of existing large buildings to dwelling units and single-family homes are the preferred form of residential development. Single-family homes and the conversion of existing large buildings have been favored by a majority of residents of the town. Condominiums, co-ops, and new apartment buildings were opposed. So I guess my question is whether that does constitute spot zoning. I mean, it seems like it might.
Well, as you can imagine, we've gotten council's advice on this. We are trying very hard not to propose anything that would trigger either in your mind or in the minds of anybody who would object to this, that this could be counted as spot zoning. You probably wanna get your own advice, but we don't think it is. And Vicki might have an off-the-cuff thought based on her experience, but I'm sorry, you had a question.
I mean, I'm curious, what was the reasoning why it wouldn't be spot zoning?
Well,
If that was the advice you were given?
right.
Because that was the first thing that struck me.
So, I think there's a lot of things. Number one, from my calculations, it appears there are 4 parcels that would apply north of town.
Okay, which, I mean, 2 of those are yours, right?
No, one of them.
Well, wait a second, you have, you have
So
three, you
I-
have 3 different parcels, I mean, including your,
I'm wearing the Pinnacle hat, not the Rich Brown.
yeah,
hat.
but Rich Brown is,
The Rich Brown hat doesn't
Yes, it
Yours-
does.
Yours,
doesn't
yours is too
qualify.
small, right?
no, it isn't too small.
Richard,
You have property to the north of you, which is within the mile.
I think what John is asking is, does 84 Orford Road one of the 4 parcels?
It is not.
84 is what?
Is where Rich Brown lives.
Right.
Yeah, so you
That's
have,
right.
wait, you have 2 parcels or 1
That's-
parcel?
There are 2 parcels
So you-
there. One is about an acre and a half.
Right.
The other is about 16.
Right.
Its lot size is well under 15.
Because of setbacks and slopes and stuff.
Pardon?
Because of setbacks.
The conservation district.
Conservation
rejection.
What if that property was merged with your property and Pinnacle? Then it wouldn't be a problem.
This
You
is
could
not
merge-
something we've thought about.
I don't care whether you have thought of
Yeah.
it, but it's
Yeah.
legally, you could do that.
So
So
in
your
some-
property, all of your property potentially
Mhm.
is applicable. I mean, your property, the 1 mile goes just like a little bit past the end of your property. You
It
have
goes a little past Pinnacle Road.
a little past your property,
Yes.
right? So you have the 120 acres, is that right? That's
100 is the,
Um,
well.
Well, you have the 100 and the 20, right? And then you have another 16 or so. So that's 136 acres, whether it's you or
Right,
somebody
okay,
else,
all right.
or you change your mind. That's 136 acres that you own, that Pinnacle owns, or that you know, let's just say that you own or beneficially own through Pinnacle. So you have 136 acres that potentially is directly affected and that you will immensely benefit from if this passes. So I just want to clarify that. So but when you're talking about 4 parcels,
Actually, before we go on, I want to make it clear that the board has in the past altered amendments, made amendments to the ordinance at the behest of developers.
So,
And so, I don't think you can say that this is bad
I am
because we would
stating,
beneficially benefit.
I didn't say anything about bad, I'm stating a fact.
Good.
It's a
thank you.
fact, it-
But
right?
It
those
is
are-
a
I
fact.
mean, those were not
What Rich
necessarily
is saying is
those
there
are
were
past
three
words.
other parcels in addition to
To those.
those that would also be subject to this, that would be 15 acres, 15 calculated.
But
I mean,
that
you said you talked to David, I mean, David, what do you have to say about how many parcels there are?
I actually have not looked, I think you have yours, the Powers,
Yes.
on the other side of the road. Yeah,
Yeah, except, you know, first of all, you didn't do a build out, as we've asked many times, or have you?
So I've done the numbers on the 4 lots. The 4th lot is just past Pinnacle Road. There's a 25-acre parcel thereby.
Which would be this one, right?
Yes,
Is that past the mile?
it just gets captured,
it is that's David's map, that's the mile radius.
So this is a mile radius?
Yes.
Oh, it is, okay, so that little teeny triangle includes it?
Yes. So that would apply under the wording of the ordinance. Now, if you were to say, so part of the reason you're here certainly is to get your feedback on the intent of the ordinance. Another piece of the ordinance, of our request for feedback is, are there things that are offered to enforce
Yes.
or inconsistent?
I mean,
And
personally,
and
I-
you have a lot of writing
I-
there, John,
I
so
have
I
a
should
list.
let you go, yeah.
So, here are the things I'll go through that you can respond to or not. One thing I would just, I have a whole room, I've actually moved out of my house and I sleep in a tent because all of the paperwork associated with her stuff fills my house. And I just wanna read a slight excerpt from one of the many pages that I've kept. And this is from your letters to neighbors, February 2015. Over and over again, this is after your amendment to the town was rejected. And you took,
February,
this letter is February 2015.
So this is just concurrent with their zone application to the zoning board.
I don't know
Yes.
what it was, I guess. But it was after you had said you had a lot of meetings and you wanted to know why your amendment failed and you sought feedback. And what you wrote in here is, over and over again, we were told that many people support this co-housing development, but don't want any changes to Lyme's ordinance. You then go on to say they didn't want any changes, so you were gonna get variances, which, whatever. But what you're stating here is that the feedback you got was that the people you spoke to were telling you they didn't want changes to the ordinance essentially relating to your project, which makes me wonder why you keep doing it. But it's just something that really jumps out at me. So what I would like answers to, and I've asked you this with each of the proposals that you've made, is to have a real serious build out instead of just saying, well, these 4 parcels here, because if this passes, this is a big deal, and some people will be very interested in profiting from it, aside from you. And that just saying, well, there's these properties here and here, does not include situations where people would want to merge properties, because if they put them together, they would qualify. So what I'm interested in is the maximum build-out that's possible in the town. So how many properties, which this, I think you probably did answer, how many properties presently qualify?
I could jump in just
Yeah.
on that one, because one of the issues that I have, your access and road frontage, says pocket neighborhood shall be located on Route 10, no more than 1 mile from the northern boundary of the Lyme Common District is established on the date of adoption of this article. There are properties to the south of the Lyme Common District that are within 1 mile of the northern boundary.
So is that just a wording problem?
That's a wording.
Okay, so
problem.
you'd have
So I just wanna bring that to your
Thank you.
attention,
Yes, good catch.
that included
Yes.
properties that you probably did not intend.
Yeah, well, that's right, it's with
the boundary.
Right.
Yeah, you
That's
just
a wording
specify that the
problem.
property is 1
But
mile
that
north.
wasn't-
Southern boundary.
that wasn't your
of the
intent.
neighborhood is the northern boundary of the common district.
I think there are a couple ways to say it. Would be in the rural district, which it would exclude anything with frontage in the Lyme common district.
Well, however, you know,
Yeah,
But
yeah,
anyway,
that's a
it-
wording
We got
problem.
it.
right,
We
that is,
understand.
but that wasn't your intent to be so.
No,
So how many properties through aggregation or merging, whatever you wanna call it, could potentially qualify? And under both cases, what are the maximum number of units? I know you can't get that exactly, but you can
Right.
you can give us a pretty good sense.
I mean, we can do that now for the existing, but not for the worst case scenario.
Right. You can give us a ballpark. What are the maximum number of units for, and this is if all of the Pinnacle Brown properties were merged, which is legally possible. What are the maximum numbers, within reason? I know you can't get it exactly.
But if we did six, if we did instead of 2 units would be allowed, 6 units, I mean, so we
Yeah,
can go back and say
six,
what
six per,
Right,
six per your, what was it,
Lot.
per your
Per-
lot. Yeah, what are the maximum number of units for all of your properties
right,
altogether? And I used your figures, and I picked, well, you know, somebody could have 6 lots. So 6 lots, the maximum building footprint for 6 lots, and the difference between what you're doing is, and there's a lot of differences, but in this case, what's very impactful is instead of having a property where you would have a conversion to 6 units, you're saying you could have one building that would, somebody, not you, but somebody could have one building with all of the qualifying units in that building.
That would be possible.
That would be possible.
right.
So under the way this is written, 6 lots, 42,000 square feet is the maximum building footprint of a building. That's an acre. 84,000 square feet would be the
It's
maximum.
still limited to 7,000, it's still got your footprint limitation.
But you're multiplying 6 times the 7,000.
No,
Well, then that's a wording problem, and I don't believe the wording says that.
Okay, so clarify that for me. That's how I
Tell
read
me
it.
how you got to that number.
Maybe I'm wrong, but so clarify it for me.
So
This is
I think if you
on
look at
F.
F1, it
F1.
does say
F1.
the lesser of 2% or 7,000 square feet.
And that 7,000 square feet would be times 6 or no?
no, for each lot.
But you don't say that. Because, I mean, what I'm reading is you can use your,
So,
if I take your definitions, you have your computed number of lots and the
Yes.
computed lot size
yes,
of the parcel.
yes.
So, and you're saying you can build you can build 6,
Well, the maximum gross floor area for any building,
So, John, yeah, I think, let's go through F1.
okay?
So the maximum building footprint of any building is 2% or 7,000,
Okay, so then that's
that's-
7,000 is it.
is it.
Okay, so that's a
Now,
clarification.
but one thing that, if you go back up to E,
back up to
Um,
E, okay.
more-
Buildings, yeah,
it- Parking neighborhoods may contain one or more principal and accessory buildings which may be arranged as attached. So you could take
Right.
and say, here's my 7,000 foot, and attach a 7,000 foot, and attach a 7,000 foot,
And then you're.
and you now have a building that is well over the
Yeah, so you have
footprint.
you have your connected buildings, which takes you to the 42,000.
And, you know, one of your first things that you said that you're trying to keep things within the scale of
Right,
Lyme. And
Sure,
if you're
yes.
attaching 7,000 square foot buildings, you're now going to be able to go well beyond that scale
Well, if you qualify for 6 lots and you connect the buildings, you get 42,000 square feet.
I mean, I can't, I
So-
don't think I can do the
right.
build out on the other ones, but I know that on our property,
Yeah.
I think the maximum footprint we can have for any of our lots is 4,000 or 4,200.
Yes, but I think,
Yeah, but
your
but-
point,
but-
your point.
But if
your
you have
point-
6 lots, you can then have 24,000 or 25,000.
So how
So,
would you write that?
I'm not writing it, you're writing
yes,
it.
so I think,
So you could put in a limitation that no single building could have a
so
footprint
what
of
I think
twice
happens,
or something.
what I think you're saying here is, we've got a maximum of building footprint in F1 of the 2% or the 7,000.
But you can connect them and have
So
42,000.
you'd have to cap the attachments in some way. That
So,
says in
right.
the way.
Detached.
Yeah, and what about the maximum lot coverage?
Well, then,
So,
well, hold
okay,
on, hold
so
on.
we've got two issues here, which one do we want to, I see your point, you're correct, we wanna make it so
Okay,
that they can't have
so I'm just giving you the,
6,000,
I'm just giving you the
7,000
feedback.
buildings. Yes.
And then the maximum gross floor area, if you have 6 lots, unless I'm misreading it, is
That would have the same
84,000
problem.
square feet, is that
When
right?
you look at the way that you do the calculations, you're saying, lesser of 2% of the computed lot size. Your computed lot size is taking the size of the lot and dividing it by how many times you can subdivide.
Yes.
That completely and totally ignores the conservation district overlays for reductions, which everyone else in the town has to,
You refer to the overlays only through Article 2,
Yes.
but only in the definition of the 15-acre lot. When you're talking here in the definitions, there's no mention of Article 2, so when you are talking about computing the number of lots, and
Well,
this,
let's look at that, which could be created
yeah,
in
Yeah,
a subdivision, meeting the requirements essentially.
no,
Just set
no,
out-
No, well, no,
read
that-
it, read it.
if, your computed number of lots, you're
Yes.
going to take and say, okay, we can break this lot with the reductions, we're going to be able to create X number of lots.
yes.
Then what you're saying is, okay, we can create X number of lots,
Mhm.
and now for the computed lot size, we're gonna take the main lot and
Mhm.
break it by that number.
Why
And
was
no,
that?
you're no
Okay.
longer
Alright.
looking, the only
I
The
see
only thing
what
that the
you're saying.
reductions have done is limited the number of lots you can create. Once you get to that point, you're saying, okay, now I'm gonna take this 100-acre lot, I can get 4 lots in a subdivision, that means they're 25 acres, and so I get 2% of that 25 acres, or
I see
7,000.
what you're saying, this could be a wording problem. We chose the, in the computed lot size, we said the computed lot size is the lot size of the parcel, which is we are quite aware that that's a
Okay, so
specifically
you-
called out
Well, you need to
definition.
be much clearer about that,
Okay,
because it's not
So
clear.
saying the
Ah.
2% of the computed lot size in F doesn't do it?
In F,
No,
no,
I
F,
the
Because your
problem is-
computed lot size is
all right.
a definition.
yeah, you're setting up definitions here under 13.2.
Yes.
Right. So when I go,
When you're talking
So,
about,
okay, and so if it were, what would the wording be?
I don't
to-
know.
Well, no, I mean, really, John.
you
how-
need, I mean, what I wanna know is I don't want any confusion about what lot size is. I would refer to Article 2 here, as defined under Article 2.
Okay, good. That's,
So we can run that by council and see.
You don't need to bother with council. Just,
That would be good, it would save us a lot of money.
okay, so it is our intent that
okay,
we use lot size as, well, and then, okay, no, that's
and
all covered.
maximum lot coverage is, if we do 6 times 26,000, is 4 acres of lot coverage.
Which would be allowed under current subdivision regulations.
Except that you're having, somebody could mass that all in one place. That's the difference. It's a huge difference. I mean, please remember that a lot of the reaction to what you're doing has to do with scale and density. And the scale of that is, whether you do it or somebody else does it, is immense. It's 4 acres of lot coverage in one setting. Not on different, you're not breaking it down into different lots. We have the maximum, like, if you didn't aggregate this in one place, you'd be right. The difference in what you're doing is you're saying you can have this on one lot, and on that one lot, you can have, what is it, 4 acres of lot coverage.
Isn't that, if I understand what you're saying, and I'm not sure that that's right, but what we're saying is we want no more building coverage than we could get if we used lot size averaging, so that instead of building 5 McMansions, which
But
would
lot
be
size,
allowed,
we've been through lot size averaging, Liz, and you know, it depends on what you're asking for.
with no
and what
bonus
you-
lot
what you would get.
requested, you could have,
Well, so I think,
20,000
I don't think so, I don't think what you're saying is
4, 8, 12,
necessarily the
16.
case under lot size averaging.
so,
you could have,
so what, let me,
correct.
so my understanding is lot size averaging, any building is 2% of the lot size.
That's unrelated to
Of
lot size
that.
averaging.
No, lot size averaging,
unrelated.
I mean, I have to go back and, we spent a whole, you remember going over that. Lot size averaging, as I recall, it really depends. It's not just
So-
a set thing.
So what, my understanding of lot size averaging is that the planning board can approve multiple.
Can,
That's right.
doesn't have to.
And that's the reason that we have this whole ordinance, because we believe
Right.
this is a good thing.
Right, and that's exactly why the lot size averaging grant is discretionary to the planning board, because the planning board, and as Tim read from the master plan, and by and large, and it continues to be the impression, is people don't want humongous buildings.
How,
But we're not talking about
Yeah.
humongous buildings, I think.
well, so, what evidence, what information do you have that people don't want that?
Your ordinance was voted down, the feedback I've heard, most of what I've heard during and after and currently is a concern about scale and density, just on your property. That's just on your property. So when you're adding with these other properties and you're changing the nature of the area, you have that much more resistance. Look, I'm telling you my
Yeah,
impressions.
good,
You
good.
are free to do whatever you want.
Thank you.
Can I step back a minute, I think? So I believe that we could, let's say this, we are unsuccessful. I think we can then go in and say, David, we'd like to build 4 duplexes on our property. Let's say we can establish there's 4 lots. And rather than spreading them out all across the property, we can cluster them.
It's possible you could cluster.
It's
them.
possible
Yes.
to cluster them. And all we're trying to do is do that.
But that's
with
not
a
all you're
different
trying.
density.
That's not all you're trying to do.
Well, why not?
You want that for your project. And in order to do that, you're enabling that through a wider swath of town, which will make a huge impact.
Yeah, so 4 duplexes is going to give you 8 units,
Right?
and this is going to
Yes,
be
so this would be
24.
24, which
Right.
is
Yeah,
a
but
huge difference
that's a big
between.
difference.
Yeah.
Well, but there's, well, but
Didn't matter
there's
of
2
scale.
parts to this. One of them is size and one is density.
Yeah,
And the size is what I'm trying to talk about right now, to try and make the point, or make sure we're all on the same page, that what this, that this ordinance would not allow anyone to build anything any bigger than they're currently allowed to build.
But this, it doesn't, because it says that they can be attached. Even if they're small, they can all be attached.
Well, forget, I don't wanna say that.
You can't
You
forget
won't-
exactly
the
what
attachment only makes it
Yes, right,
better.
yes, I
The
agree.
attachment only makes it better. Let's say that you
the
don't,
attachment increases your scale, you know, the size of the building, that's,
Right.
No, I don't think so. I
Well,
think that
I mean,
if
they-
that's what's coming across, we
What,
need
what
to
do you
try to.
intend by attached, and what's your definition of attached? A breezeway between them?
Which was our first conversation 11 years ago. I think that what we're proposing is no more than what 4 different people could go and propose to build in terms of footprint and gross floor area. Does that come across?
No, that
Okay.
doesn't come across.
Why not?
I explained why not, and so did everybody else.
So-
Because one of the reasons
so-
is the attachment, that you are
Okay.
now, whether you're calling them separate buildings or not,
Right.
when you have a house and an attached garage, when you're looking at it from the road, it's one building.
Right.
Either if the house is set back or the garage is set back some, and you're considering them separate buildings, they're attached, it all has a single roof line that you see, and it's going to be considered and viewed as a much larger scale than what is currently allowed.
Yes, I
Got
understand,
it.
I
So
understand that
no more
concern.
than 4,200 square feet can be.
Well, let's
Yeah,
move
let's
along,
move
but
along.
you're getting our feedback and you
Yes,
can do.
that's right, and we will.
You can
That's
do whatever you
what we will.
want
So
with that.
that's the size concern.
Where's the 4,200?
Oh, that's
The
how.
42 just happens to be our
That's-
number, our.
John asked for a
computed-
build out and that's our.
Oh, I see,
our
right,
figure.
okay,
Right.
right,
Our
connected build,
compute-
okay.
Our
Okay.
computed lot size would be.
Let's go through the
42.
stuff.
So
You don't need to
connecting
convince us.
Right,
You need to do what you want.
What in fact, I really want is your fine reading of this, which you've done, and so let's.
So let's
You got
go.
more notes?
Yes.
Okay.
I got more.
all
Yes.
right.
The uses. Another impact of this is because there can be a massing of all the lot, whatever you call it.
All the building footprint?
Yeah, all of this stuff
gross floor
together.
area?
You could end up with essentially, well, even on your property where you have Lock Lime Lodge, if you sold your property and somebody came in and wanted to do lodging, they could build very large buildings, one connected to another, with a tremendous amount of lot coverage, as this is written now. So you could have a humongous lodging establishment. You could also have a humongous sort of combination of, especially if there were older buildings on some of the land, you could have conversions in those to office, studio, restaurant, combos. You could have clinics, institutional government and lodging. So you could have these huge buildings in that swath that were essentially these, I don't know what to call them, the shop, not really a shopping center, but multi-use,
Okay, so.
monstrously sized.
Okay, so this is very helpful. The attached language came from a concern, we tried to address your concern about massing. So our idea was to say, okay, you can have 500 square foot units, but they can be attached. So that's where that was
Well,
going.
you're not addressing my concern about massing.
Right, okay.
In fact, you've just underscored it.
So,
So
he's got-
part.
what's this next one?
So
Yeah.
that's 13.30 and uses. To me, that opens the door for some really unintended consequences that could pop up in that area. Then when you get to common facilities, you have fitness area and performing arts as possibilities. Everything has accessory retail rights associated with it. So the town would have, you have a fitness area and you could make the case, or you have performing arts, and you could make the case that incidental and accessory to those uses, you can have essentially a retail operation. You can have a a performing arts center or a fitness area that you basically open to the public.
Oh, interesting. So are those specific concerns, the others,
Those are two that popped out, but
Yeah.
essentially what I'm concerned about is in your defining what are essentially, we can do this, and not limited to, everything there has associated accessory retail rights. And that's a major concern to me. And then you have 1340E, you talk about scale and character to be appropriate, essentially the line. And that's, it's very nice that you say that, but there's nothing we can do with it, because there's no specifics in here, and everything in here is essentially defining, you're writing the law as to what, if this passed, that would be, so it doesn't do us any good.
I'm missing this last one.
1340E.
So what the meaning of scale and character compatible with Lyme is
When you're
allowing-
redefining what
Yeah.
the scale is, it's really useless. There's no upper limits on number of bedrooms in a.
Well,
Well-
we do have a question about I on that
right,
one.
Yeah.
right, and so,
No upper limit on the number.
You could have your 50% whatever, neither one of those, but you could have very large,
8 bedroom.
bedroom.
yeah, 8 bedroom,
Yeah.
10 bedrooms, and is that really what Lyme wants? I don't know.
Mhm.
You can ask yourself that.
Do you have, the reason we wrote alternative A and B there is, do you have a sense of which would be preferable, either 50% with fewer 2 bedrooms or 50% that are smaller than more than 100 square feet?
Because this is going to the senior housing.
Well, I'm kind of interested, because what do you mean by unit? Because most units are defined by the number of, like, is this unit design?
We've said dwelling units.
So they're.
Would it be better to say dwelling
Yeah,
unit design?
I would prefer that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Dwelling
It,
units.
uh,
yeah,
yes,
'cause you
but
call
not,
them
not as the
dwelling
heading.
units. Yeah.
Oh,
Well, or
okay.
say dwelling unit design,
Okay.
But-
All right.
just on I.
And in terms of which one is that with the, oh, it's I. I know you feel that the 2 or fewer well, forget fewer. The shall contain, 2, somebody could just say, the fewer doesn't matter. 2 would be the upper limit of the lower end, right?
Mhm.
So
Well, if you don't say fewer, I think then it says it has to have.
Right, but what I'm looking at is how people could use this, not how you're phrasing it exactly. So the two or fewer, but let's say somebody
You
wants
say
to
no
do,
more than 2.
no more than 2.
Something is 2 or fewer.
Yeah.
Anyway, either way you do it, somebody doesn't have to do 1. They can have the
Right.
2. And I know that you made the case earlier that you felt that the 2 would be more likely to have seniors or whatever. That doesn't do much for me, because it's not senior limited, and,
I think guys have different views on
yeah, I
how
think we
to
do.
establish senior limited.
This
Then-
isn't established, this isn't limited
Right.
to seniors at all.
This
well,
is
that's
open to
right.
anybody,
Yeah,
and,
but the advice we've gotten from people who are doing that is that to try maybe either a size limitation or a number of bedroom.
well, if you're interested in
limitation.
senior housing, you make it senior housing. This is not that, and I'm just giving you my opinion.
Well, but-
You're free to do whatever you want.
Yes, good, I
But-
appreciate that.
I'm just
Thank
giving you
you,
my,
John.
I don't need to convince
But when we said
you.
senior last time, you didn't like 55, you wanted it to be 62.
I wanted 62 and over and limited, yeah, that's what I like.
And, and also you somebody was not sure that Lyme had any, and you didn't want David to have to go in and enforce it. And I think David would agree with that.
Well, again, it's very easy to enforce it on covenants.
Well, he's gonna have to go in and enforce the number of bedrooms, because any study that's then being used as a 3rd bedroom, he's gonna have to go in and enforce in this thing here. So,
Oh, because I'll have to do bed checks.
Units are not gonna be able, I mean, you know,
Well,
this
people can
does,
sleep in the living room, but that's not how.
Well,
that's
That's
exactly how,
This is,
that's
Liz.
exactly how student groups function. They sleep in closets, they, you
Right.
know, so, yes, there's all kinds of
Right,
arrangements.
so, but for, as individual members of the committee,
Uh-huh.
some of you would think it would be good to limit it to 62. Some of you, I mean,
Well,
we're gonna be taking something, and obviously there are a lot of people who are supporting us in doing this.
You,
We're
you
not
do
just-
whatever you
right.
want.
And so
You-
we're trying to
You don't
do
need
the
to
best
convince us,
we
or,
can.
and
If
we
you
don't
do
need to
If
something
it's
convince.
really senior, then you should really put senior,
And in
somewhere
fact-
in there.
You would say.
And I don't know why, what
Well,
is
senior's
what is?
better because.
Well, then if that's what you want, you should put senior and make sure that there are those controls. But, yeah, I also wonder, what is the pocket about the neighborhood? What does that mean, pocket neighborhood?
Well, it's a term of art of a relatively small neighborhood in a pocket.
But this is not a, for Lyme, this is not a relatively small neighborhood. I mean, I know that Michael Whitman, I've talked to Michael Whitman at length, and his idea of a pocket neighborhood would be to have, you know, like a number of houses, single-family houses around an entrance, you know, where, that all shared basically an entrance. This is, to my, and again, ignore me to whatever degree you want, but you want feedback, I'm giving it to you, is mammoth. And
Well, most of this looks like it used to be called cluster development or something like that. And so that's what it looks like, because the whole pocket idea, pocket parks are usually little parks that occur in between other things. I mean, that's the only where.
Well, no,
I see pocket.
there's a pocket neighborhoods are things, and like, in talking to Michael, I understood, and that struck me as, yeah, that's a pocket neighborhood. These are massive.
So what would a pocket neighborhood be the way you're thinking?
Michael Whitman's idea was, you know, you could have maybe 5 houses if you
So
qual-
okay, just for example, would you tear down lime timber and put 5 houses in
No,
with a
you would
single
have to
driveway?
qualify
So-
to be able to do that.
Uh-huh.
And you'd have to get either change the ordinance, or you'd have to find just the right property where you had that acreage.
I think what he's looking at is you have 5 houses or 6 houses.
You have to do lot size average.
3 on
Yeah.
either side of a
You-
Oh, I
open
see.
space.
Yeah.
So it's like a cluster, or it's an
Yeah.
open space subdivision.
Yeah.
If you look up pocket neighborhood, you'll see
It's a
little
thing.
neighborhoods of between 15 and 25 houses clustered around a common green or
Well,
something
he was
like that.
talking about a lot less than that, and
Okay.
when you look,
Okay.
when you look up
Thank you for telling us. I
anything,
didn't know what
you're
the- I
generally
hadn't heard
looking
that.
at things that are in much bigger municipalities than Lyme.
I mean, and this actually, you know, this is describing an apartment building, not really a neighborhood.
Right, it's an apartment building, and I'll finish with this. You know, I mean, I feel like I'm talking to myself, because I've had the same conversation with you from the beginning. And you had your open space neighborhoods, you had your conservation neighborhoods, you had your co-housing neighborhoods. I can't even remember the names of the other ones. And now you've got the pocket neighborhoods. And what do they all have in common? You wanna have what you want on your lot, on your property. You know, I understand that. I think what you want on your property is too much. But what you're doing in presenting these amendments is essentially recycling the same thing under different containers. And the only thing they have in common is that you get what you want. And I know, look, I think you are sincere about, I mean, I've spent time with both of you, probably more with you at the senior housing thing, and you know, you make very good points, and you know, you're clearly sincere about that. I think when it comes to your property, from my opinion, and excuse me, but the blinders go on. And you're interested in getting what you want, and I guess you believe that it's good for the town if it extends there, and I don't. And I think you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. You get the same feedback with little different versions, because you have the different versions that you're presenting. but it's the same thing over and over again. And you're obviously free to do it again and put the town through this, but I would have you go back to your letter where you said, over and over again, we were told that many people support the co-housing development, but don't want any changes to the ordinance. I think you should listen to yourself.
That was a terrific summary, John. Thank you. Regrettably, I had one more question.
You know, Rich, I genuinely like you. So it drives me crazy to have these conversations with you. Really, I mean it, it's just awful.
I had the technical question in F1, we talked about building footprint. I think we understand your concerns there. It wasn't clear to me if the maximum lot coverage, no, you said that were that all to be agglomerated, aggregated in one place, that would be distressing, and so we need to think about what that means.
I think one of your big problems is you know what you want for yourself. And this has always been the case. You know what you want, so you're starting from there. And it's like, okay, so how do we get what we want and make it palatable to the town? And I don't think you can square the circle.
Do you think that Lyme will ever, in your own opinion, want to do more energy efficient building?
Lyme, well, I mean,
Well, no, this is super.
Lyme is.
But there are lots of other ways to do energy
I
efficient
put,
building.
I
There are
put
tons
solar
of ways to
panels
do
on
it.
my house, it's
Yeah, I mean,
energy
there's
efficient.
Our
solar.
neighbors live off the grid, there's
What's-
totally energy efficient.
Yeah, that's,
Right.
I think
Okay, so
if you want an
yeah,
answer to
okay.
your question, Liz, I can give you this answer. I think in terms of a trade-off, they're gonna have this
Shared
huge,
walls.
now forget the shared halls and all of the lovely sounding things. There's gonna be these huge, massive buildings with for Lyme, enormous density. The fact that they're relatively energy efficient, is that a good trade-off? I don't think so.
I don't think it's
I mean, it doesn't affect anybody else's power bills, it affects yours, but it
Right,
doesn't affect my
exactly,
power
it has no
bills.
effect
Yeah,
on-
there's a little bit of carbon
Well, hopefully
externality,
people
but.
are thinking about the larger.
Well, people are thinking that
And that's-
if you put that sort of density, whether you're energy efficient or not, you put that sort of density on that land, you know, no matter how efficient you're gonna be, or on a practical level, however efficient you're gonna be, you're gonna have a much, basically a enormous gross impact, and I don't mean gross disgusting,
Right,
but a
yeah.
gross impact on energy usage in Lyme, period.
Good. I don't have any other questions.
So
Thank you.
So my other question is there any way that Lyme is gonna be able to have increased density and lower cost of housing?
Yes, there are many ways, and we've been over this, and I don't wanna go over it again.
Right.
And I, you know, coming out of this, the years that we've all been together, I guess is one way to put it, I've taken your input very seriously, and because of it, put in, I can't tell you how many miserable hours looking into this stuff, okay? And whatever your opinions are, having put in a tremendous amount of time and effort into getting a sense of how the ordinance works, what it permits, plus what our housing inventory is, I think Lyme is certainly doing okay. Can it do better? Of course. But whenever you say, well, you can point out all sorts of things that are wrong, but from my point of view, I'm not willing to blow things up so that you can have what you want, with very little assurance to me that it'll be an improvement to the town. My takeaway is that there are ways that we can improve this town. I don't think what you're presenting does it.
Yeah, I mean, the feedback I get from people is that Lyme is certainly gonna grow, but I think they don't want the town overwhelmed because of property taxes. mean, that's the real issue, or one of the real issues, I think. I mean, people realize that the more people are here, our property taxes are gonna go up. My taxes went up over $1,000 this year. I mean,
Well-
it's a real issue in Lyme now, property taxes. People are really getting concerned. And the school, you know, we've got, how many kids now? I think we just had 4 more kids that came into the school. They may even have to split one of the classrooms now. The 4th grade might even have to be split now. So I think that's the issue, is just having growth, but not so fast that it overwhelms everything.
I think you're gonna have a hard time with this amendment. Hey, I mean, I could be wrong, Trump became president. So, you know. Oh, you didn't hear that? So, yeah, I mean,
Okay.
you could win.
Any
Good.
other, concerns people see?
It's Lee.
It's late.
Actually, I'm gonna throw out one more, just
Oh,
real quick.
yes.
On the first page, on the computed number of lots, if you look at the computing number of lots for lot size averaging, one of the first things it says is it's determined by the planning board. This to me leaves a lot open to interpretation, saying, you know, you say, well, I have met all the requirements in the Lyme subdivision, and the planning board says, well, no, you haven't, but they say, well, it doesn't say you have to agree. So having something in here where you have a determinant
I
of
see.
who is going to make that determination that you have met all those requirements would be helpful, just so that there is no question about
Why
it.
should it be different than what it already is?
Well, I agree, I think it should be the planning, it should be read
Well-
exactly like the lot size
Why does it have
averaging.
to be restated? I mean, that's the other thing.
So the reason that the reason we separated this all out from the lot size averaging is specifically because of the permissive nature that the planning board may approve. And what I'm seeking is a way to say, there is a specific name that we can request that says, using the criteria that the planning board would use, that we can be assured of getting the maximum number of lots. Is there a way to say that?
I can imagine a planning board wanting to support that.
Right. But I mean,
And then, can you just say, what is the benefit to the town of this proposal? Can you tell me that?
yes.
What is it?
I believe that despite the incredible good work that John and the housing committee did, you did a lot of work, I commend you. That in fact, homes are not available in town that are at a reasonable price for.
Rich, that's not true, that's
Well-
just not true.
But that's what Vicky's asking.
Yeah,
and
We
I-
believe,
Yes.
and we believe we can support an argument that it's very expensive to buy homes.
And you're gonna
and
make
this would-
these available to current Lyme residents who,
Anybody who,
Anybody
if
who would-
the building costs are no lower. The two things that reduce costs are sharing the cost of a lot between 6 people as opposed to 2, and
Or really
having
one.
common space, or 1, and having common space so that you can have a smaller footprint, so that everybody doesn't have to duplicate the empty houses. Those are the two.
okay, and so if you guys
benefits.
decide, we get this approved, we're moving to Tahiti, and we get the developer in here who's gonna sell these properties for as much, because they're gonna put granite and all that to make them very, very expensive, and then how is this benefiting the town?
All we can do is
Right, but this is gonna
create rules
be
that
on-
allow somebody
On
to
your
do
lot
it.
plus 3 others, okay?
But that's not planning. The plan,
Okay,
when
so
you're
just
planning,
asking.
you're looking at what, not.
Well, right now, it's not possible to build. This at least creates the possibility. Right now, all you can build is expensive. So,
I'm not saying that this is not gonna be expensive, and
I
there's
might
nothing,
wanna, right,
nothing that's gonna guarantee that this is gonna be moderately priced, or that it's gonna be available to anybody, that it really benefits this town.
right. Well, you've looked at pro formas. You know that you can't build 20 units and include affordable units.
I'm
in
just
that.
wondering what's in this for the
Yeah.
town, okay, is what my question
Okay.
was, and I challenge you to,
Be
like, convince
moderately
me that
priced,
this
not
is gonna
low
be
income.
Right,
moderately
and again,
priced
this
and
comes out
available to
of
people here in
what,
this
what
town.
you want and what you would do in your project. But you could move, and then you've opened up the swath of land to people who are not gonna have the same,
That's right, all it does is
Interest of you.
give a developer the
the
possibility.
possibility.
But we're not insisting that it be for low-income people.
Right, so, and
Because-
it probably won't be.
And after 11 years of waiting, it's very hard.
The 11 years is not, that's,
I'm
I
just saying
can't
that's,
help you with
that's
that.
a cost.
The new developer could buy it and they would own it for, you know, one day and they're good to go. So, and Sandy Kelsey doesn't live in his house anymore. So look at the opportunities you are providing for others
Mhm.
and ask
And,
yourselves,
all
is
right,
this
so
gonna
we
be
think
good,
it's
is
a
this
great
gonna be good
idea,
for the town?
And
Is
you
this-
don't, and we'll see.
Well,
Right.
just asking.
Okay, well, that's helpful. I'm gonna save my notes, all right?
Okay.
Thank you
Alright.
very much, guys.
Thank you, folks.
And
Thank you.
we'll
Jay, thanks so
see where it goes. Now, there's gonna we will do this by petition, and that means I think that, some version of that, I don't think there's time to get more feedback. I don't know, we wanna get more feedback, but we certainly will reflect these changes.
But there will be,
made.
there has to be a hearing.
Oh, well, first we have the petition and then we have to.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, so we.
So we likely won't see anything before we see your final petition.
Well, I think the petition has to be due on the 14th.
I think, I sent you that,
Right.
whatever, I have to relook it up.
So we will rewrite it no, December is what he's told us.
Oh,
Is
that's
that-
next week.
That's right.
So you're gonna come up with a final thing?
Right, we're gonna, I mean, you gave us
Right,
many concrete things that I understand and we can.
yeah, I'm just
reword.
trying to
And
understand.
we'll sit with David again for sure, we
Yeah.
can certainly.
So
look at that.
you're going to write something that'll go essentially from there to hearing, is that right? Or
You'll submit it as a petition by the 14th.
Right.
Should be next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday,
Right.
exactly, yes. And
And
so,
then your hearing is probably like the 12th of January or later, I don't.
It'd have to be I believe it's the next planning board available, right, there's a time frame for noticing it, and then,
Right, but you wouldn't do it December 22nd, because you don't have enough time.
I don't believe
Correct.
that we're,
There's not enough time.
Yeah,
okay.
okay, just wanna make sure we're on the same page, all right?
I would say probably in January for when you have the hearing for,
the other hearing?
yeah, do it at the same time.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you, all
Thank you,
right,
folks. I appreciate it.
another night.
Okay. Let's do the minutes. Anybody got minute issues or minute issues?